Hello, Psychonauts. Today I want to talk about the idea of oneness, specifically the idea that there is only one mind, or that we are all one consciousness. So first I want to establish what I mean by oneness. When some people think of oneness, they think of somebody feeling at one with nature, maybe in a metaphorical sense. Or you might think of the sort of intellectual realization that you can get to if you think of the entire universe is just this one system. It used to be condensed to one single point, so we're all this like one thing, we're this one system. That's another idea of oneness. But here I really want to specifically focus on the literal experience of oneness, of non-duality. Now, I'm fascinated by this idea for two reasons. First of all, because of my direct experiences with it, but also because of all the religions and cultures and philosophies throughout human history who have discussed this idea and had this idea central to their philosophy in some way. So I will use some references. I'm going to be using this book by Schrödinger. This book is What is Life, but it's a collection, What is Life, and his essay, Mind and Matter. That's what I'm going to be reading from. And I'm focusing on chapter 4, which is titled The Arithmetical Paradox, the Oneness of Mind. So I'm fascinated by this idea of oneness, and I think that there's something to it because we've seen it throughout all human history. People have had this idea, and then also the direct experience. Looking back at the experience, it always seems like a paradox trying to understand it. But the thing about this state is the state of non-duality, the state of oneness. The state is self-evident because there's nothing outside of it. There's nothing outside of it to prove it from. There's no outside perspective from which it can be proven. It's all-encompassing, so it's completely self-evident. Psychedelics have consistently produced the realization that there's only one mind, or that we're all one consciousness, one fundamental self. Now, I'm skeptical of it because I try to remain skeptical of everything, but I want to see what I can actually know about oneness, what we can figure out about it. People throughout all of human history have experienced oneness, and I think that that can tell us that even if it doesn't tell us something about the nature of reality, it tells us something about the nature of ourselves, which I think is just as important. I don't know how an idea like this could, transcend different cultures and times and places if there was no truth to it at all. Okay, so we either have there's only one mind, or there's multiple minds. I guess there's no really in between. So we have one mind, or there's multiple minds. So that either means that the true nature is that there's one mind, and that the illusion is that we experience the separateness of mind. Or the true nature is that we really are separate, individual, completely disconnected minds. Mind is just a product of our brain, and that's it, that there's nothing else. Now, I don't want to say that that's not the case, because I really don't know. Okay, so I mentioned that the idea that there's only one mind, or one consciousness, it is self-evident under certain modes of perception, certain states of consciousness. So you could argue that that's a delusion, that this is, it's a hallucination, it's an illusion, it's not reflective of the true nature of reality. Why are we so sure that our sober state of consciousness more accurately reflects the nature of reality than altered states of consciousness? There's no reason to believe that the experience of oneness is any more delusional than the experience of separateness. There's really no universal reference point. Like I said, I want to get into this book. So the book starts, the arithmetical paradox, he says, is there appears to be a great multitude of these conscious egos. The world, however, is only one. There are two ways out of the number paradox. So the first way out is where each monads, no communication between them. His alternative is, there's obviously only one alternative, namely the unification of minds or consciousness. Their multiplicity is only apparent. In truth, there is only one mind. He then goes on to talk about the Upanishads and the mystical experience of union with God. He mentions The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley, which is a book I was referencing as well. This is the idea that I said. Struck by the miraculous agreement between humans of different race, different religion, knowing nothing about each other's existence, separated by centuries and millennia, and by the greatest distances that there are on our globe. You know, he talks about how, you know, the Western idea of this is that it's unscientific, and that's because our science, based on Greek science, is based on objectification. As much as I respect the scientific method, I think it might be flawed at its foundation. The idea that to understand the nature of reality, we only look outside of ourselves, that, you know, that we can trust empiricism all the way to the end. We're intimately connected, I think, with the outside world. I mean, we can't separate the objective world from our perception of it. The doctrine of identity can claim that it is clinched by the empirical fact that consciousness is never experienced in the plural, only in the singular. Not only has none of us ever experienced more than one consciousness, but there is also no circumstantial evidence of this ever happening anywhere in the world. If I say there cannot be more than one consciousness in the same mind, this seems a blunt tautology. So this is another interesting idea. Let me turn to something quite different. I find it utterly impossible to form an idea about how, for example, my own conscious mind that I feel to be one should have originated by integration of the consciousness of the cells that form my body. This is another interesting idea about consciousness. Like, how are we just this one continuous conscious experience? You know, what about the components that make us up? What about our cells? Don't each of our cells live their own independent life? So, you know, that's kind of like us. We're the cells of this, you know, greater consciousness. All the atoms, like in the universe, all the quarks that are inside the atoms, they could all have some sort of consciousness. And then at the peak of it, you know, if you, the whole sum of everything in the universe, and you get this one mind. So here's another good idea that he makes up. He says when you're dreaming at night, you know, you have other characters in your dream, but really your mind is the one making those characters. But you know, you can talk to this character and you'll be waiting in anticipation for what they're going to say to you. You know, but really it's like, oh, well, you should know that, right? Because your mind is the one making it. I think this is a really good point. I mean, we just extend this to real life, okay? So just because you guys seem like you're separate people, that's not really an argument for why we're not actually one. Just the idea that, you know, it seems like you're a different person, and I don't have access to your thoughts, and I don't know what you're gonna say to me next. You know, in a dream, there can be a person in front of me, and I don't know what they're gonna do, I don't know what they're gonna say to me, but they still are a projection of my mind. I'm not saying that you are a projection of my mind or that I'm a projection of your mind. We're both projections of a larger, greater mind. I think this is a good thing to kind of conclude everything together. I submit that both paradoxes will be solved. I do not pretend to solve them here and now. By assimilating into our Western build of science the Eastern doctrine of identity, mind is by its very nature a singular tantum. I should say the overall number of minds is just one. I venture to call it indestructible since it has a peculiar timetable, namely mind is always now. There's really no before or after for mind. There's only a now that includes memories and expectations, but I grant that our language is not adequate to express this. I agree with a lot of Schrödinger's ideas, a lot of the way he discusses the oneness of mind. I think I talked about everything that I wanted to cover about oneness of mind. I'll probably think of some other things later and I might add them in the description. I'll put some of the quotes from Schrödinger's book in the description too. But yeah, that's all I have on the oneness of mind. I truly think that we're all one consciousness and that the total number of minds in the universe is one. So that's it for today.